Hi, welcome to week 6 for graphic design home instruction. If you hear some stuff in the background, my dog's barking and the kids are running around, so sorry, but it is what it is. Thanks for sticking with this stuff. You guys are doing well so far. I'm going to start the videos from now on answering some of the common questions and just kind of going over some observations I had, things like that. So first thing, if you haven't already done so, sign up for Remind. A lot of you guys are taking advantage of that and it's really been helpful. You can send me pictures of, say, your layers window if you're stuck on something and you think it has something to do with the layers, but you're not sure what you're doing wrong. Any kind of information you can give me like that is certainly helpful. Another thing that we can do is if we really get stuck, you've been talking to me on Remind, you've had some questions, we just can't figure out together kind of what's going on. You can give me in Google Classroom your Photoshop file that you save from Photopea. I can open that up then and I can kind of help you figure out whatever's missing or whatever's not going right for you. And then we can kind of move forward and I can talk to you on Remind and say, oh, here's what the issue was. Here's what you need to do. So in that case, you wouldn't be giving me the exported file, the PNG. Like here, let's take a look. Like I wouldn't go to export as PNG to give that to me if I have a question about how to do something. I would just save it as a PSD, turn that into Google Classroom. It'll take a long time for it to download on my computer, but I'll do it. I can download that and then I can kind of help you figure out where you're messed up, with whatever you're trying to do. As long as you ask me that question ahead of time on Remind, we've tried to figure it out, we can't figure it out, I may suggest that you do that. Other things, I feel sorry for you guys if you're trying to do this on a Chromebook. I get it, it's a little bit tougher. One of the things I suggested is if you get like a flash drive, if you have one at home, like a USB stick, you could save your work onto there. That way you don't have to worry about it losing it on the Chromebook from the downloads folder, or if you can't get it onto your drive or any of those kind of issues. So if you have one of those at home, not a bad idea. The other thing is, unfortunately, save often. We had one student, at least as of this video, that lost his stuff, and I'm sorry, but he's gonna have to go back and kind of do it again because for this next week's 6 assignment, it just kind of continues from where we left off. So save often. When you do that, you're just going to go to this file, save as PSD, and it's just going to download a new file each time. So just make sure at the end, move that most up-to-date file to your desktop so that next time you go to work on it, you have it. Some of you guys may be able to knock these assignments out in one sitting and turn them in, which is great. If not, though, just make sure you save often because you never know. What if you lose your internet connection? What if your computer shuts off? What if the battery dies on your laptop? There's a lot of things that can happen there, so just save often. That'll certainly help. I've also noticed you guys live some crazy schedules. I'll get Remind conversations from you guys at like 3:30, 4:30 in the morning. Yeah, you guys need to sleep at night and be awake during the day, but I guess that's not happening. Let's see. Oh, as far as future assignments, just so you guys know kind of where we're going after this week, I'm going to take some of those suggestions that you guys made as far as like things that you would want to do in Photoshop on week 1 and 2 where, you search YouTube, you found some videos. Those are going to be what's coming up in the next coming weeks here. So, look forward to those. You guys came up with some, lessons that I've never seen, and, we're going to work through those together, and, they look like really fun things. So we'll work through those. The other thing is I have a poll I put up in Google Classroom, or it'll be up for week 6. What I want to do here is, this is kind of odd for me to teach like this. Normally I can kind of read the classroom, see, based on your faces, what's making sense, what's not, who's interested, who's not. You guys are able to ask questions. We don't have that here. I don't have a sense of whether or not you guys are liking this Photopea thing, or if you hate it, or what the deal is. So in that form, let me click on this. If you guys could fill this out for me, this would be just super helpful so I can make this class better for you guys. First question is just, would you rather be doing this Photopea stuff where, we're kind of actually working in a program, or are you just running into like so many technology problems and stuff that you would just rather do hand-drawn assignments, videos with questions that go with them, essays, things like that. Let me know, because again, I can cater to the class to kind of fit that. I have a feeling it's going to be the Photopea things because it feels more like we're a class and you're actually kind of learning useful things. And then the other thing is, if you have any suggestions, there's probably, for some of you guys, some things sit in your head. You're like, oh, I wish Mr. Arena would do this way. I wish the videos were more videos and shorter. I wish he would do more written directions. Whatever it is, tell me, because if you're probably feeling that way, there's probably a lot of other people who feel the same way. So just type it in there. I don't even know when you send this in if your name will go along with it, but I won't judge. I'm just trying to make this class better for you guys. So by all means, please answer those honestly. Please fill those out for me, just so I get an indication of how you guys are feeling. All right, down to business. So what we're gonna do for this week should be a lot easier than the last week for you guys. You colored this thing in. You spent 2 hours doing it. You may or may not have finished. Hopefully you turned in what you had. Now what we're going to do is, for week 6, you're going to end up giving me 3 things. 2 of them, well, 1 you definitely have done. 2 you might be done already. So the first thing you want to give me is the black and white photo again. Say you can't find it on your desktop, you lost it. You can always go back to week 5's assignment, download it from there. Don't forget, you'll have to open it in a new tab or a new window to be able to download that picture. And then go ahead and turn that picture in for week 6. So the black and white photo is the first one. Second thing you want to give me is the finished, well, let's call it base colored photo. So probably where you're at now. Maybe after 2 hours, though, you don't have like the background done, or you just didn't even think to do the background. Do those things, then turn in that copy. So that's 2 of the 3 things. The third one is going to be, let me zoom in a little bit here. While I'm thinking about it too, let me show you something too. Say I was zoomed in, say I was coloring. Something I do all the time without thinking about it. If we were in school, I would have probably told you guys this the next day. I just didn't think about it when I was making the video. If you hold spacebar, it switches over to this hand tool. So if I'm zoomed in, I can just kind of use this hand tool and grab and drag rather than zooming in and out. So just kind of a nice useful thing. If I'm holding spacebar, it automatically jumps to this tool. When I let go of that, it goes back to my normal, eraser or brush or whatever I'm using here. All right, so here's my finished colored photo. What we're going to work on this week is, see how these details kind of pop in here? That's where we're going now. Places you'll notice this, if you look at their suit jackets as I'm turning these layers on and off, that's one of the spots. If you look at their faces, see how before not to be morbid, but it almost looks like, like you're at a funeral and there's like heavy makeup on a person? Well, when you add this little detail here where you kind of put some flesh tone, some color to the face, that kind of dresses things up here. Now, something to watch for is try not to make it look like the people are wearing lipstick. You got to be kind of subtle with some of these things. But anyway, that's where we're going this week, and that's going to be it for this week, are these detail things. I'll walk you through how to do this right now, and then that'll be it. So first thing I would do is, you probably have all these layers here like I do. Hopefully you've been naming them as you go, because you may want to go back and adjust those at some point. So that'll make it easier. If you haven't, no big deal. You can always turn layers on and off to kind of see what does what. All right, so first thing I would do is, just to get myself organized, I'm going to add a folder. So that's this button right here. It says New Folder. I'm going to name that folder. I'm going to call this thing Base Color. So I double clicked on that to be able to get to that. All right, so here's Base Color. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my first color layer here. Now another thing too, if you notice, while I'm thinking about it, I drop the opacity on some of these layers. If you're not liking how some of your colors look, don't forget you can lower the opacity and the blending modes. Let's click through here. You'll see I used color on that one, color on that one, linear dodge. You're going to just keep seeing linear burn. You'll keep seeing different ones as I go. Color burn. So if we click through here, there's a bunch of different blending modes that I used, and what I used to pick that is just kind of trial and error. It's for every color that I was putting, depending on where I was putting that color, it changes what blending mode is going to work best. And you can see how low opacity I have some of these things. And the nice thing is, if you're looking at yours and you just don't like the color of one specific thing, now is the time. Go ahead and fix it. As you're finishing coloring in your background and all that, I'm maybe not real happy with Mo's jacket here. Maybe I would go back and mess with this color of this thing. Some of the things too that I colored are kind of subtle, like Mo's hair. This is actually like a really, really dark brown color, and it just looks a little bit better than when it was black. So those little details are going to go a long way as well. All right, so anyway, I created this folder. It's called Base Color. I'm going to click on the first color layer. I'm going to go to the very bottom here, and I'm going to hold Shift as I click on the last color layer. Now, if you notice, I'm not including my picture in that. So that's selected because I was holding Shift. Everything in between. The first one all the way down to the bottom because I held Shift, selected all of them. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these layers, since they're all highlighted, I'm going to just drag one of these layers into this base color folder that I created. The way I know I got these in here, whoop, and I didn't get it in here, it went above. That was highlighted that time. I think that folder was highlighted when I did that. Is if you try and close the folder by clicking the little triangle and all those layers disappear, you know then that those are, oops, that's because I double clicked on that, that those are inside of that folder. Okay, so next thing we want to do now are the detail colors. Now if you notice here, I did that all in one layer. If I haven't finished this yet. If I keep working on this, I may end up using more than one layer. The reason for that, if you notice, my layer is set for a blending mode of overlay and the opacity around 50%. I might hit parts of the picture as I'm adding details that I just don't like that blending mode and I don't want that opacity. No big deal. I'll just create another new layer and I'll set up the blending mode and the opacity kind of how it needs to be for that layer. So let's pretend I never did that though, and let's start looking at creating a new layer and doing this together. Now that new layer, you're going to want that to be on top of your base colors. So I'm going to drag that up and try to get it to go here. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to drag my base color down. There we go. So now layer 2 is on top. Layer 1 for me really should be on top too because I had this color in here before. Okay, so here's where my detail color is going to go. So for now, I'm just going to call this detail color. You may end up renaming that. Maybe you're just using this layer for the faces you figure out as you go here. So right away, I'm going to set this blending mode. I'm going to start with overlay. And I'm going to drop this opacity to around 50%. This just gives you a good starting point. All right, so pick a spot on your project here, and let's start adding kind of some more highlights and shadows to this. So to do that, I'm going to keep it real simple. I'm going to just paint white or paint black. So again, on my keyboard, D gets me to the default colors. X will flip-flop those colors. So I'm going to hit D, X. So now I'm painting with white, it looks like. So I'm going to just kind of test this here. I'm going to go to my brush tool. And I'm going to make my brush very fuzzy. The hardness is 0. As far as size, again, trial and error. You just have to try it on a spot here and see whether you need that to be bigger or smaller. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have the opacity of my brush fairly low. The number, I honestly don't know. I'm going to have to kind of play around here. Now I'm looking at like Larry's jacket here, and I'm going to just try painting some white on his jacket and kind of see what happens. Now where I'm going to paint the white is where the natural highlights are in this photo. So I'm going to go a little bit bigger here. I'm going to zoom in just a bit. So again, that's Alt and the mouse wheel, or Control or Command plus minus also does the same thing. All right, so I'm going to just kind of paint some of this on here where those highlights are, and that looks pretty good. Now, if that was too much, I could always undo it. I could also, you know what, that is a little too much. So I'm going to undo that. I hit Control Z or Command Z to undo that. And I'm going to just drop that opacity a little bit more on mine. I'm going to make my brush just a little bit bigger too. Again, on the brackets next to the letter P, I can control the size of the brush. So one makes it bigger, one makes it smaller. And I'm just going to kind of paint some of that in a bit lighter. Alright. And now I'm going to come down here. And I think my opacity is still too high, but for the sake of this video, just going a little bit faster, I'm going to keep it up there. So wherever these natural highlights are in his jacket, I'm just starting to paint in a little bit of white. Now we have this set at a really low opacity because my opacity of the brush at the top is 21%. I was going to point to the screen, but obviously you guys can't see that. The opacity up here is 21%, and the opacity of the layer itself is only 50%. So I can only make this thing, if I colored over it a bunch of times, it would only become 50% opacity. The first time I colored over it, it's only 20% opacity. So you might even drop this number lower and color over the same spot more than once to kind of subtly make things kind of fade in and out and brighter and dimmer. So now I'm going to go ahead and kind of just keep going here in one or two more spots, and then I'm going to switch over to working on some shadows. And it might even feel like you're not really doing much at first, but kind of trust the process. I promise you, you are. So now I'm going to switch over to black. The way I'm going to do that again, I had already hit D on my keyboard. That gets me the default colors. I'd hit X to flip-flop the colors. Now I'm going to hit X again. That gets me back to my black. So I can switch between highlights and shadows real quickly here. So now I'm just going to exaggerate just a little bit here. My opacity definitely needs to drop. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and do that a little bit here. And then in a second we'll look at faces. And you could also, instead of using black and white for these, you could do colors, like darker versions of this blue in my case. You don't want to overdo this and kind of make the picture look fake. You're just looking to add a little bit to these things. So what's nice about using black and white at low opacities is I'm going to move over to this opposite jacket here on Mo on the right hand side. I'm just going to darken up some of these shadows a little bit. And again, I can run over the same spot more than once. My laptop's going really slow because I'm trying to make this video at the same time that I'm working. I'm just kind of painting here. And if I could see, you know, nothing showing up, maybe this is a time where I need to add another new layer and do something other than overlay. But if I turn this on and off here, you can kind of see on Larry's jacket like what's starting to happen here. It just adds a little bit of touch of realism to this thing. Now, say I look at that and I'm like, oh wow, that looks good, but it's a little bit too much. I can still play with the opacity of this layer here. So again, I might end up with 1 layer for this. I might end up, for some of you guys, with 10 layers for this. All right, let's look at the faces. Now, for the sake of mine, I'm going to do this all on the same layer. Or actually, you know what? I think I am going to make another one here. I'm just going to call this new layer Faces. Because chances are I'm going to be doing roughly the same reddish color on all of these. The blending mode will end up probably being the same on all of them. I'm going to start with overlay, but I might mess around with that as well. And I'm going to drop this opacity. Again, 50% is like a good starting point. So I'm going to go to my brush tool here, and I'm going to pick a color that makes sense for coloring in a face. Pretend like you're putting makeup on somebody. I'm going to go with like a reddish here. And again, I don't want this to look like makeup when I'm done. I just want it to look like it's enhancing the photo. And the nice thing is too, if I do this and later I decide I don't like some part of this, I can always erase. Because this is in its own layer, I could switch to my eraser tool and just erase the part I don't like. Alright, so let's take Larry for example here. And I'm going to zoom in on his face. And I'm going to just think about where the color would be. Now, where color is, wherever your flesh is thicker in your face, tends to be more color because there's more blood flowing through that part of your face. So I'm going to just kind of go to his cheeks here and just start painting in some of this color. Now, I might kind of increase the opacity a bit here. Well, I was all the way down to 4%, so yeah. And there is no magic number, I can tell you. But again, the more times you run over something, the more you're going to see that color start to show. And for the sake of the video, now if I was working on this on myself, I might keep that somewhere around 19% and just keep running over top of the same spot over and over again. Because what that will allow me to do is I can really fade in the color that I'm adding. But for the sake of the speed of the video here, I'm going to just kind of color in here. I'm going to add some color to his forehead in some different spots. And as long as I kind of just change up how often I run over spots, and some spots kind of get run over more than others, it's going to start to look kind of natural. The tip of the nose might stay a little bit whiter. You know, wherever there's like thicker flesh, I'm just adding a little bit of color. And let's say I like that, but I just feel like some spots are like too much color now. What I can do is I can switch to my eraser tool. I can, again, have the opacity fairly low. You can see when I was doing this before, I had it all the way down to 7. And I'm just going to start erasing this. I'm at like 40% now. In spots that I feel like are too much. So it's just back and forth like this till I kind of get it right. You're going to want to zoom out and look at this as well. Now, one thing I can tell as I'm doing this here is my brush for my eraser is way too hard. So I'm going to turn that hardness down. I can actually kind of see where the circles were where I started erasing. I want to just kind of fade all this together. So again, flipping back and forth between my brush and my eraser. And it will look like when you're done you haven't done much, but when you turn this layer on and off, you'll start to see kind of really where you added in some useful details. Now, things you may want to do that I haven't done yet, maybe zoom in, like for example on Curly. I might want to add an eye color to him. Now, I might do that in its own separate layer because, again, different blending mode, different opacity. And as I go, I would just probably name these layers. When you are all done your detail work, you should be able to turn on and off your layers and see what you did. So first, if you turn off your base color, you turn all these layers off, you'll see the black and white one. You turn on your base color, that looks good. You start turning on these extra details here, and it really, really kind of brings this thing to life. So when you're all done, all the details are there. You're giving me 3 things I told you. The black and white photo for week 6. You're giving me the base colored photo that you have now finished totally, given all the base colors to, including background. And then finally, the detail color stuff. So you're going to go to File, Export As, and don't forget Save often as you're going, but when you're done, you go to Export As and you're going to select PNG, and that is the file that you are going to give me. Hopefully this is it for videos. If I realize I forgot something terrible and a lot of you guys start asking questions, there might be some supplemental videos that pop up during the week. But again, use me as a resource. It's what they pay me for. Ask questions on Remind. Make sure you watch the videos, pause them, rewatch parts you don't understand. That's probably going to be more helpful than asking me things on Remind. But when you get stuck, use me as a resource, ask questions, and I'll do my very best to help you. Good luck.